I never expected a cleaning lady to show heroic love for a millionaire's special daughter. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. The sky was heavy with dark clouds, mirroring the tension in the air. I was struggling to hold myself together. Each heartbeat felt like a countdown to disaster. My mom had just been fired. We were broke. With no options left, I found myself at the doorstep of a world so far removed from my own Shay's home. Shay was everything I felt I could never be: stunning, charismatic, and the only daughter of a millionaire. Her laughter rang through the halls, while I cleaned the corners of her glamorous life, picking up remnants of privilege. But beneath the surface, I sensed a different story. I watched her from my cleaning cart, a pop of color against the sterile white walls of her mansion. She had a fragile sparkle in her eyes. Her moments of silence spoke louder than her laughter. She was drowning in expectations, a life so perfect yet so suffocating. I felt a tug at my heart. I was just a cleaning lady, yet I could see the cracks in her flawless facade. One day, the tension reached a breaking point. I was scrubbing the grand staircase when I heard a muffled cry. Shay was upstairs, a sound so raw that it sliced through the air like glass. My hands trembled. Her anguish ignited something in me. I discarded my cleaning cloth and rushed up. I found her in her room, curled into a ball on the floor. Her mascara had run like black rivers down her cheeks. I knelt beside her. The scent of her expensive perfume mixed with desperation hung thick in the air. "Shay, what's wrong?" I whispered. She looked up, her eyes wide with fear and shame. She was a princess trapped in a tower of golden bars, and I was the unexpected knight. Suddenly, I felt a strange connect-Iona bond forged in shared suffering. I wrapped my arms around her, feeling her trembling body against mine. I could have let the world see me as just an employee, but in that moment, I found purpose. Holding her felt right, even in the chaos. I knew I had crossed a line. I had stepped from the shadows into the light, willing to face the repercussions if it meant protecting her. As she clung to me, the reality of our worlds collided in a way neither of us could comprehend. Then came the doorbell. It echoed ominously through the silence. Shay's eyes widened, panic surging through her. Who was it? The darkness outside felt cold, and I could feel the weight of the moment holding us both captive. I brushed my thumb across her cheek, a silent promise to be there. But as I turned, the door flung open. A shadow loomed in the doorway. I held my breath. The world outside was about to erupt into our fragile bubble. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The figure in the doorway was a tall man, severe and imposing, with a tight jaw and eyes that scanned the room like a hawk. My heart raced, already anticipating the worst. Shay's grip tightened around my waist, her breath hitching. I knew instinctively that this was no visit of kindness. The atmosphere grew heavy with dread, the silence thick enough to suffocate. "Shay," the man's voice sliced through the tense Iona blend of authority and disappointment. "We need to talk." She stiffened, the rigidness of her body a stark contrast to the vulnerable girl I had just held. I took an instinctive step back, unsure of my place in this sudden complication. The man, who I guessed must be her father, locked onto me with a glance that felt like a threat. And then, as if sensing my unease, Shay's face turned toward me, her eyes pleading and desperate. In that second, I felt the weight of her world, the expectations, the judgment, the fear. Could I be more than just the hidden part of her life, the cleaning lady who witnessed but never intervened? "Dad, please don't," Shay whispered, her voice small and tremulous. "There's nothing to discuss, Shay." He stepped inside, barely acknowledging me, as if I were merely furniture, a part of the background of their extravagant life. "You can't keep doing this. You need to focus on your responsibilities." His words dripped with a toxicity that twisted my insides. "Responsibilities?" she echoed, her tone rising with anger, frustration cutting through the fabric of her demure persona. "Like being perfect? Like pretending to be someone I'm not?" A part of me admired her reply, an ember of rebellion. But the other part worried for her. She was standing up to a man who clearly held so much power over her life, and here I was, on the edge, watching their conflict unfold. In the midst of the storm, my heart twisted as I became acutely aware that this might not just be a simple family argument. Her father's expression hardened as he stepped further into the room, moving closer to us. "You think this is a joke, Shay? You think you can justify me? You're a disgrace to this family." His words were army boots marching hard on fragile ground, crushing all the hopes I had started to feel for her. My pulse pounded in my ears, but the rage began to seep through my fear. How could he talk to her like that? I was just a cleaning lady, yet something inside me yearned to defend her, to stand up to this tyrant Thamar. "Thompson," I found myself saying hesitantly, surprising even myself. "Shay deserves to be happy. You can't force her to be someone she's not." The sharp glance he threw my way silenced me instantly, a reminder of my limits. "This is none of your business," he spat, his tone dripping with disdain, but Shay's voice faltered through the haze of tension. "Actually, it is," she said, her gaze unwavering despite the acid of her father's words. "I need to decide what my life looks like. Not you." As her father's anger morphed into a mask of disbelief, the air crackled with uncertainty, and I sensed the shift in the room. The ground beneath her feet felt dangerously unstable, the words that had once shielded her now threatening to plunge her into darkness. "Move aside," he demanded, and I instinctively stepped closer to Shay, creating a shield between her and the man who threatened everything she was trying to stand for. Unexpectedly, Shay's eyes fell to the floor, a mixture of defiance and despair flickering across her features. "I can't keep pretending," she stammered, barely above a whisper. My heart ached for her, for the girl who had brightened my life with her laughter, trapped between the person she was expected to be and the person she truly wanted to become. "Then let's make that choice together," I uttered, feeling braver as the moment stretched before us, the threat looming but momentarily forgotten. But as soon as the words left my mouth, I sensed the gravity of our situation returning. Her father's face twisted with rage, and I could practically see the battle lines being drawn. "More to this than you think, cleaning lady," he mocked, his voice penetrating with venom. "You have no idea what you're getting into." The weight of those words landed heavy. Images I had only recently dared to entertain about future possibilities began to flicker and fade. I didn't belong in this struggle. But something deep within me urged me to stay, to offer whatever small light I could provide against the dark clouds of her reality. Just as I prepared to fight for her, a loud crash echoed behind us. A vase shattered, sending fragments flying across the floor. My heart dropped. I turned just in time to see Shay's mother, pale and trembling, standing at the entrance. She had witnessed it all: her daughter's confrontation, the arrival of the storm, and the uprising that was brewing. Her face was a canvas of shock, but more alarming was the dawning realization that flowed over her features like tidewater. In her eyes, I saw a flicker of understanding, but so much more a glimmer of fear for what was about to be unleashed. "Enough," she said, her voice seemingly split between the roles of mother and wife. And as I stood there, feeling the weight of two worlds colliding around me, I braced for the tempest that was about to unfold, knowing I was no longer merely the cleaning lady but an unwilling participant in the battle for Shay's soul. And just when I thought the turbulent waves had reached their peak, I caught a glimpse of Shay's father's expression hardening. "You think this is about happiness, Shay? There are consequences to defiance. You're only making this worse for all of us." In that moment, as his threat hung heavy in the air, a chilling realization hit me: the real war was just beginning, and we were mere pieces on the board, ready to be sacrificed. The room felt like it was shrinking around us, thick with the aftermath of threats looming silently in the corners. Shay's father stood rigid, a stone statue in his icy demeanor, while her mother edged closer, uncertainty etched deep in her brow. Shay remained caught in the crossfire, that familiar spark of rebellion flickering in her eyes but now tangled with fear. "Mom," Shay called out, her voice trembling, "please, you have to help me." The words hung there, a desperate plea floating amid the storm of accusation and impending chaos. Her mother took a hesitant step forward, glancing at her husband as if searching for permission in answer to the churning disarray in her heart. "Help you?" He spat, disbelief layering his tone. "You think you can justify our family name without repercussions? Think again. This isn't just about you, Shay. This affects everyone." My chest tightened at the weight of those words. I thought back to the few moments I'd shared with Shay, navigating the overwhelming silence of her mansion, her laughter breaking through the loneliness in the abandoned corridors. It was about her. It was about the girl I had come to cherish beyond my duties. How could he turn her desire for freedom into a family curse? And then I felt it, this flicker of anger morphing into courage. "Mr. Thompson," I found my voice again, strong this time despite the quaking trepidation inside me. "You speak of consequences, but what about the consequences of stifling her? This pattern of control will only leave scars. Is that what you want for your daughter?" He whipped around to me, eyes blazing with fury. "Stay out of this. This is not your place." "Maybe not," I said, shaking even as the words flowed out, "but I am the one who sees her beyond the walls of this house. I see Shay for who she is, not who you want her to be." A tense silence gripped the room, and for a split second, Shay's eyes glinted with something hope, perhaps. But before I could decipher the moment, her father's snarl shattered it. "You will regret this invasion, cleaning lady." I can assure you that. The implication of his threat sent chills racing down my spine as Shay's mother shifted her weight, the tension radiating around her like sharp glass. My heart raced, visions darting through my mind of what consequences might ensue. As I looked back at Shay, I felt a gnawing sense of urgency swelling within me. I couldn't let her navigate this alone. Unbeknownst to all of us, the fragile tendrils of kindness sprouted in the most unexpected places. The houseworkers, the very people I'd grown close to because of our shared burdens, began filtering in cautiously. I could see their faces, their expressions steeped in concern but also a quiet resilience. They were the threads holding this tapestry of pain together, and somehow, they sensed the friction in the air. "Wait, everyone. This isn't the time to divide," Shay's mother finally broke through, her voice barely above a whisper, trembling as she addressed her husband. "Think about the impact on her life. On our lives." The air thrummed with the weight of her hesitant scowl. She conjured the strength to face the monster beside her. "Mom, please," Shay's voice cracked. "I need you to trust me. I am ready to choose my own path. You taught me that life is about choices." For a moment, I thought I saw the walls around her mother begin to shift. A flash of recognition ignited in her eyes, perhaps remembering her own dreams once buried beneath the weight of expectations. Was this her awakening? But her husband's glare quickly extinguished that flicker. "And he'll have no daughter of mine live beyond the confines of what we've built. You'll ruin what we've sacrificed for." With each angry syllable, I saw Shay's spirit shatter, piece by piece. My heart raced as dread flooded my senses. Could I truly offer her any hope against this storm? It felt like a grim cost to bear, yet I wouldn't turn away. I stepped forward once more, clenching my fists at my sides, ready to embrace whatever might come. Then, unexpectedly, one of the other houseworkers, a tall man with a gentle demeanor, someone who had quietly supported us both without fanfare, spoke up. "Maybe what's been built isn't worth saving if it suppresses your own daughter's heart." The room froze. All eyes turned to the man, including Shay's mother and father. My breath caught in my throat, and for the briefest moment, I felt a collective sense of defiance rising against the confines of this ornate prison. "What do you know?" Shay's father snarled, the audacity of the houseworker clearly igniting the rage within him again. That I know, he affirmed quietly but firmly, that being a family means supporting each other through happiness, not being shackled by fear and expectation. A round of heartbeats passed. Even Shay's mother seemed to be weighing the implications, the very fabric of her reality trembling under the spotlight of truth. In the charged silence that followed, I held my breath, praying for Shay and for the strength to rise above the dark. My heart pounded, torn between the awakening strength of her mother's hidden potential and the looming threat of her father's volcanic fury. The man's courage ignited a flicker of warmth in my chest, but just as suddenly, a sharp cry broke the tension, the sound of slipping glass. I whipped around to see Shay's mother, her hands trembling ever so slightly, dropping the precious family heirloom shed clutched, the shattering echo almost deafening in the stillness. In that moment of chaotic confusion, I caught sight of Shay's expression, struck by fear and uncertainty, eyes wide and body trembling, where hope and desperation coiled tightly together. I couldn't help but wonder whether it signified the beginning of something beautiful or the end of everything. The aftermath would unfold with no certainty. But I knew one thing: we had entered a new realm of conflict, with the battle lines drawn deeper than ever before. Everything was on the line now, and the stakes were rising exponentially. Would we hold on to our beliefs, or would we be swept away in the tide of familial chaos? Just as the world around us began to shatter, I felt the weight of everything shift. In a moment so simple yet monumental, leaving me to ponder one pressing question: would hope's flicker fade into darkness, or could it burgeon into a fierce flame capable of lighting the way? The tension in the room began to simmer down, but only slightly. Shay's father, still seething with anger, glared at the shattered remnants of the heirloom strewn across the floor. It was as if the shards reflected the disarray of emotions swirling around us, a poignant reminder of how easily everything could fracture if not handled delicately. "Enough!" he boomed, his voice like a thunderclap. The authority in his tone wrapped around us, suffocating and potent like the heavy scent of polished wood and bitter memories. "You could have avoided this spectacle, Alyssa. But your frailty continues to embarrass us." Shay's mother recoiled as if struck, her shoulders drooping under the weight of his words, yet underneath I sensed a flicker of rebelliousness igniting. Just as Shay had once tried to protect her dreams. "Maybe it's time you listen to her, Robert," she found the strength to say, her voice barely above a whisper but imbued with a steely resolve that hadn't been there before. "Maybe it's time you listen to her and not just to the family name. Don't you see what this is doing to her?" At that moment, a wave of surprise washed over me. Could it be true that her mother was finally finding her voice in the tumultuous storm? I dared to hope as I locked eyes with Shay, who was silently pleading with her mother to stand her ground. In the suffocating air of conflict, unexpected moments of kindness began to flourish, as if the home itself was daring to breathe. Another houseworker, a woman with a warm smile named Maria, stepped forward. "I know what it feels like to be caught between two worlds," she said gently, eyes still darting towards Shay, "to want happiness but feel trapped beneath expectations. I've watched you, Shay, always trying to please others. It's time to please yourself." A grateful glimmer flickered in Shay's eyes, a tiny spark in the overpowering darkness that enveloped us. In that moment, the chorus of workers stood behind her, faces morphing into a tapestry of support. They were no longer just shadows in the background, they were allies in Shay's fight for autonomy. But Robert was unyielding, towering over us, his fists balled at his sides. "And you think a rabble of house staff can make decisions for my family? You have no idea what this is about," he spat, voice dripping with disdain. "No, but we know what love looks like," Maria said, her voice unwavering. "And love does not dictate chains, it gives wings." Shay's mother turned her gaze toward Robert, her eyes suddenly alight with defiance, illuminating shadows that had long clung to her spirit. "Love means nurturing, not suffocating. And right now, you're suffocating our daughter." A silence settled in the room once more, thick and heavy like a shroud. I felt my heart thud painfully in my chest, drawn into the tumultuous storm where love was now pitted against fear. Would Robert respond with rage, or was the chink in his armor deepening? Did he really want to conquer the essence of their family, or was this a battle waged upon their hearts, just as hope started to reclaim its ground, Robert unleashed a tidal wave of emotion. If you care for his daughter so much, tell her what she must do. She will follow the rules, or I will force her to bear consequences heavier than any of you can imagine. Stop! Shay screamed, eyes gleaming with tears that threatened to spill over. You can't keep threatening me into submission forever. I have a right to choose my own path. I felt the corners of my mouth twitching with concern. This was a turning point, yet I feared that freedom was lurking on the other side of a precipice far darker than she anticipated. Robert's face twisted in disbelief. Choose? He mocked. You don't know what it means to choose. You're a child given comfort without understanding. All of this supposed freedom, it's only a fantasy. But before I could utter a warning, Shay took a defiant step closer to her father, her voice steady despite the tremors of fear underpinning each word. You think of me as a child, but I am growing. Haven't I proved my worth? Each day, I become less of that doll you want me to be and more of a person who wants to explore, to live, to breathe. The moment was electric, a taut string ready to snap. Yet, before she could finish, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed through the hallway, stealing all attention. The door swung open, and a figure rushed in. Aiden, Shay's older brother, his eyes wide with something I couldn't quite read. Stop! He shouted, taking in the scene, bewildered but with a sense of urgency that momentarily silenced us all. Dad, you have to listen to her. You're losing her. You have to let her go. Apprehension washed over me while the household stood still, the collective heartbeats echoing the dread that accompanied the new arrival. Aiden had walked away long ago, distancing himself from the family pressures and expectations. And now, here he was again, crashing into this chaos with a revelation that promised to unravel the threads of control spinning ever tighter. What surprise lay ahead? The sweet air of courage mixed with the bitter scent of uncertainty. With every passing second, the stakes elevated, and I pondered, would the family remain splintered, or could this shocking intervention herald the change Shay desperately needed? As raw emotion swirled within us, I felt the shadow of dread crawl threateningly up my spine. No one was prepared for what lay ahead, for the truth Aiden might unveil or the fierceness of Robert's fury. The moment hung suspended in space, an effect of time bending around us, while my heart breached against the uncertainty. In that harrowing instant, a fragile hope fought against despair, yet I knew the worst was yet to come. Would love break the chains? Or was it doomed to shatter amidst the wreckage that had become their lives? As the tension in the room crackled in the aftermath of Aiden's entrance, emotions toppled like dominoes, twisting through each of us in a frantic dance of fear and yearning. I could see the weight of Robert's rage transform into confusion, a fleeting turmoil that did not yet clash with the contempt he held tightly to. The air felt charged as Aiden moved further into the space and stood beside Shay, a silent ally wrapped in brotherly intensity. "Douc, Dad?" Aiden continued, his voice fervent with urgency. "This is real, and it's happening here and now. You have to understand that if you keep pushing her away, you'll end up losing her for good. She's not a pawn in your game anymore. She's our sister." Shay's eyes sparkled with a mix of gratitude and trepidation, but then I saw the fleeting flicker of doubt that danced across her face, threatening to overshadow any resolve she had mustered. She had fought to rise above a lifetime of expectations, and here stood Aiden, opening another door, but would it lead to safety or further conflict? Robert, face creased with disbelief, snarled, "This is what you want, Aiden? To betray your family for the sake of your sister's whims? You just want to stand beside her like you did when you left?" The accusation hung heavily, palpable enough to shatter the fragile moment. But I noticed the way Aiden squarely met his father's gaze, undeterred. "No, Dad. I want her to be happy. And it's not betrayal to want her to be herself." Even as his words sparked weak glimmers of hope, the tension had become a living entity. Shay's mother remained resolute yet silent, her shoulders squared as if bracing for fallout. Maria glanced between the unfolding drama and her own duties, her presence still a glimmer of warmth amidst the storm, reminding us of what true connection could feel like. Then came the unexpected and unsettling sound outside the door. A loud metallic clatter forced each heart to quicken, and I felt the air grow heavy with apprehension. Perhaps the world outside had come creeping in, eager to infiltrate the fragile bubble we had created within these walls. "Mom." Aiden turned, brow furrowed with worry. What was that? Before anyone could answer, the door swung open again, and there stood a figure I recognized but hadn't seen in ages. Eli, Shay's childhood friend, his wild curls and gentle smile now masked with an urgency that distinctly changed the atmosphere. "I'm sorry to barge in like this, but Shay, you need to listen to me." Shay's eyes widened as a fresh wave of emotion overcame her, morphing confusion into something potent. "Eli. What are you doing here?" "I had to come. I hoped to catch you." Before he hesitated, glancing nervously at the family assembled, then steeling himself to focus back on her. "You deserve to know what's happening. You can't just let this go on like it has." Robert's demeanor shifted into fury, his voice booming once more. "Who do you think you are, walking back into this home and demanding anything from my daughter? I'm someone who cares about her." Eli shot back, defiance sparking in his expression. "And you're not going to cage her anymore." In that moment, a strange solidarity thrummed in the air. The workers stood with Maria, their gaze transitioning from fear to courage, emboldened by this rising tide of support coalescing around Shay. They craved change, to change they knew was vital if the toxic cycle was ever going to break. "I'm tired of living a life others expect me to lead," Shay finally declared, her voice steady even against the throbbing uncertainty rising around us. "I won't let fear define me. And if that means leaving this place behind, so be it." Suddenly, the room felt too small. Each heartbeat echoed with overwhelming choice. Robert's face paled, the insistent fury giving way to disbelief. Another fissure in the control he had clutched so fiercely, but just as hope flickered to life, Eli stepped closer to Shay, his voice gentle yet resolute. "But if we're going to do this, Shay, you need to know everything. Because I've been trying to gather the courage to tell you I heard something. Something. About your father's dealings. The things he has been hiding could put you in danger." The room swelled with palpable dread. My heart dropped as I absorbed his words, knowing without knowing what they carried with them, a promise of revelation that could shatter their world to pieces. "Eli, what do you mean?" Shay's tone had shifted, the fragile courage of her earlier declaration now teetering on the edge of terror. "That I overheard some people talking, people who are involved with him, and it sounded serious," he continued, looking between Robert and Shay, desperation lining his voice. "I didn't know how to protect you without exposing you first. But if you stay, you might be in way over your head." That I and the deepening shadows of the looming confrontation. Aiden stood frozen, absorbing the weight of the truth unfolding. I felt fear prickling at my senses, an ominous portent hanging in the air. This moment, raw and pulsing, opened a chasm between safety and the unknown. The flickers of hope and dread braided together, leaving us on the precipice of a decision that could change everything forever. What secrets threatened to emerge? What chains would bind or liberate them? And would courage rise resiliently or break apart under the daunting weight of their world? With hearts suspended in an agonizing uncertainty, I realized we had crossed an invisible threshold. As the binding power of love faced the lurking shadows of deceit, the storm was only just beginning to churn. The atmosphere quaked beneath the intensity of Ella's confession, a tremor palpable enough to shake the very foundation of our gathering. Faces frozen in clash, captivated by the collision of hopes and fears, uncertainty draped over us like a thick fog, suffocating yet familiar. "Dad, you have to explain this," Aiden demanded, his voice breaking the heavy silence with unexpected force. "What kind of dealings are we talking about?" Robert's face morphed into a mask of indignation, the paleness returning to his cheeks now tinged with anger. "This is preposterous. Eli has no right to come in here and throw around baseless accusations. You're just trying to turn Shay against me, am I?" Eli countered, his defiance undeterred. "I stood by while you suffocated her under your glossy version of control. The truth needs to come out, Robert." Shay's breathing grew louder in the silence, each inhale weighted with dread as Ella's words began to chip away at the illusion surrounding her father's semblance of control. "What do you know?" she whispered, clutching the edge of the table for stability. In solidarity, Aiden shifted closer to her, shielding her from Robert's withering gaze. "Whatever it is, Dad, you need to answer her," he implored. The dynamic crackled, familial ties fraying at the edges, straining against looming revelations. With a huff of disbelief, Robert worked his jaw, the gears of anger clicking together. "I protected you. You think you know what's best, but this is all for your sake. You don't understand, none of you do." Aiden's face contorted with urgency, desperation bleeding into his voice. "No, we don't understand. We don't know what it is to live under the chokehold of lies. But we do know what it's like to be a family, and if there's something that threatens us enough." Robert suddenly roared, filling the room with an oppressive silence that followed like a shadow. "You will not speak to me like that. I am your father." Betrayal seared through the air as he lashed out, the fragile threads holding this family together rapidly unraveling. "And it's time for you to recognize that true protection can sometimes look like risk." Eli interjected, casting a glance toward Shay, who stood awash in confusion and realization. "I need to know the truth," Shay said again, her voice steadier now. It was more a statement than a question and yet laced with the unsteadiness of vulnerability. Robert faltered, the bravado slipping in the wake of her demand. His face contorted, wrestling with something that deep-rooted selfishness and the fear of losing what he believed he could control. "You're too young, too naive to understand what's at stake. You will only make things worse." This time it was Maria, offering her presence as a soothing balm, who stepped forward, her voice calm yet firm. "Shay deserves the truth. We all do. You can't shelter her forever. This facade will only suffocate her deeper." "What do you think you're doing?" Robert sneered, incredulous. "Don't you remember your place?" Fortitude settled into the room, tightening like a fist around roiling hearts. The workers had gathered closer, eyes flickering in encouragement, the fear that once paralyzed them tangled with a newfound hope born from solidarity. They understood the reality of living under Robert's shadow and wanted freedom for themselves, too. "I've lived in fear long enough," Shay finally said, standing taller as she gathered strength from Eli and Aiden. "I will not let you dictate my life any longer, Dad." And as she clasped Aiden's hand, the bond between the siblings pulsed like a heartbeat, echoing against the silence of Robert's indignant adult world. In that moment, as the tension broke and transformed into palpable resolve, the door swung open once again. This time it wasn't Eli but a stranger police officer dressed in crisp navy blue, imposing yet layered with empathy in her eyes. "Excuse me," she said, shifting her gaze around the room before settling on Robert. "I need your cooperation regarding a serious matter." Shay's heart raced, and together with Aiden, they exchanged a look of bewildered realization. "Me?" Robert asked, caught off guard as unease rippled through him. "Yes, sir. We have some questions regarding possible financial irregularities. We'd like you to come with us." The ground beneath us quaked again, the delicate balance of power shifting. I watched as Robert's face fell, disbelief mingling with the fear now etched deeply into his features, tempo rising as the stakes shifted dramatically. Her words set off a whirlwind in the room. Robert was caught between the bitter truth and the illusion he had worked tirelessly to maintain. Shay stood frozen, the fears she held deep within colliding with a sliver of hope born from defiance. Could this be an end to the suffocating grip of his control? Could this breach finally liberate their daring desire for freedom? But as Robert faced the unexpected challenge, the question hung in the air, swirling like a tempest. Would the truth they long sought come to engulf them, or would it simply chain them in new, more haunting ways? In that fractured instant, the promise of a new beginning rested in the hands of fate unforeseen, precarious, and utterly unrelenting. The moment fractured into silence, the reality of the police officer's presence wrapping itself around the room like an unwelcome fog. The air turned electric, charged with the tension of unspoken fears and nagging uncertainty. Robert's bravado began to crumble, revealing the man underneath vulnerable and unsuspecting questions. He stammered, his voice a mix of incredulity and anger. He shot daggers at each of us, as if the eyes of his family could somehow shield him from the damning gaze of authority. This is absurd. I have done nothing wrong. Eli stepped forward, emboldened by the urgency in the room. You think they came here for a chat? It's time, Robert. You can't keep hiding behind deceit. Your lies are finally catching up to you. Shay could hardly breathe as she processed how quickly everything had spiraled out of control. The moment she found her courage took on a new shape, shifting under the weight of a harsh reality that was no longer whispered in shadows. There the police offered a sharp knife that would slice through every lie and lay them bare. Ma'am, I need your cooperation now, the officer reiterated gently, her voice softening in response to Robert's growing tumult. It was as if she recognized the battle raging inside each of us, Shay's heart racing alongside the chilling realization of just how deep Robert's deception had sunk. I've worked hard for everything I have. Robert exploded, nearly sputtering as he glanced nervously from the officer to Shay and Aiden, trying to re-establish the old dynamic. You can't look at me like that, like I'm a criminal. This is all a misunderstanding. As he spoke, Shay felt the buoyancy leave her heart. The hope ignited by the officer's entrance began to flicker, tempered by doubt. Striking out at the officer would not resolve the boiling pit of distress. She was all too aware that their lives could still spiral into chaos. That I know you are all frightened, the officer said, her soothing tone breaking through the tension. But it's crucial that we deal with this now before it escalates. Robert, my concern is not with your wealth. My obligation lies with any potential wrongdoing. If there is nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. Shay watched as Robert wrestled with the walls closing in around him, the mannerisms of his false security dissipating as he stood exposed before the truth. Shadows stretched across the floor, a reflection of the man he could no longer be. Can I speak to my children in private? Robert hissed, reaching out for control that was already seeping away. No, the officer replied firmly, her gaze locking onto his. Your family deserves clarity, Robert. This isn't just about you anymore, this is about everyone you've impacted. Aiden tightened his grip on Shay's hand, squeezing until she had no choice but to respond. In that brief moment of shared strength, they silently vowed never to return to the way things were, even if the storm that loomed ahead could be devastating. The officer's superior stepped into view, his presence firm and commanding. We have gathered statements from employees and witnesses who have raised concerns about your financial dealings. It's far more serious than you expect. Shay's stomach twisted as she met Ellis' eyes briefly, each shared glance filled with an unspoken empathy. They existed in a world beyond the reach of Robert's arrogance. The bonds of secrecy that had once tethered them were fraying under the weight of truth. Yet, a single flicker of uncertainty remained, threatening to extinguish the hope she so desperately clung to. Get out of my home, Robert spat in a final act of defiance, but the officer simply shook her head, refusing to yield to his fading authority. As the tension escalated, Maria stepped forward, her heart reflected in her steadfast expression. Shay deserves better than the illusion Robert built. We've all been trapped, but this is your chance to finally break free. With those words, Shay felt her resolve hardening again. She wouldn't remain a prisoner of someone else's mistakes. This was her moment, not only for herself but for the others who shared the burden of Robert's control. Suddenly, Robert lunged forward, his facade cracking completely as he turned on Maria. And what would you know about family? You exist in the shadows of this life. You're nothing more than a cleaning lady. What right do you have to lecture me? The room gasped collectively, shocked by the venom spewing from him, but Maria held her ground. I may be a cleaning lady, but I have lived in truth, unlike you. I have carried my family's heart, weighed down by love, something you've never understood. In that charged silence, Robert's guilt hung in the air, heavy and undeniable, but Shay's newfound resolve shone through. As the police officer prepared to escort Robert away, a final gasp of urgency echoed from within her. Please, Shay cried, inches from losing everything. There's so much more you don't understand. Don't leave me with him. But before the officer could address her, Robert met Shay's frantic eyes, his expression a tornado of rage and fear. You think you'll escape me? This changes nothing. And just like that, the vulnerability threatened to unspool once more, as her hope began to dwindle. The weight of Robert's words hung heavy, reality bore down, fierce and relentless. With the police escorting Robert toward the door, Shay was left reeling, her heart pulled taut. The truth was out, but the cost weighed heavily, making her feel more exposed than ever. A sudden realization coursed through her as a hand brushed against her shoulder. Turning, she saw Eli, belief unwavering in his eyes, though they mirrored her own terror. "Whatever happens next, we stand together," Eli whispered, grounding her as Robert vanished down the hallway, but just as the door closed behind Robert, a chilling sound broke through, a muffled cry, barely discernible. It echoed against the walls, sending a chilling shiver down her spine as an unexpected doom flooded her senses. The sense of foreboding crept back in, wrenching away the hope that had dared to bloom. As the door closed and the confrontation dwindled down to questions left hanging in the air, Shay realized that the fight was far from over. The truth had been unveiled, but in its wake stood perilous paths lingering even deeper in the shadows, hunting her with urgent whispers. What more did Robert conceal? And how much higher was the cost of unraveling a lifetime of lies? The flickering light of the overhead chandelier continued to cast ghostly shapes on the walls, echoing the tension that still lingered in the air long after Robert's departure. Shay felt as if she were trapped in a dream where reality and nightmares mingled, each vibrant tapestry of emotion tugging at her heart in relentless waves. "Shay," Aiden broke the stillness, his voice trembling with the weight of uncertainty. "What do we do now?" He looked toward the door, eyes wide, and she could see the fear brimming beneath the surface, threatening to spill over. Shay turned to the rest of the room, taking in the faces that had been caught in the storm. Mariah's expression was steady yet tender, a mosaic of empathy etched into the lines of her face. Eli stood close, worry lining his brow, but there was a flicker of something else, a determination, and it was contagious. "I don't know," Shay admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The truth was both exhilarating and terrifying, its jagged edges threatening to draw blood. "But we can't let him come back. We have to protect ourselves and each other." She glanced around the room, picturing a future free of fear but uncertain if it would ever exist. "Maybe we should talk to the police again," Eli suggested, taking a cautious step closer. "If they know what he's capable of, maybe they can help us." Maria nodded in agreement. "And if necessary, we can seek legal counsel. You have the right to protect yourself and Aiden. No one should have to live in fear." The small glimmers of hope in their words sparked something inside Shay. A flicker of strength that had lain dormant began to swell, lighting the way through the encroaching darkness. But as the balm of hope wrapped around her heart, it was punctuated by a sudden and relentless pang of resentment. Why had Robert done this? Why had he taken everything they had built and twisted it into a tool of manipulation? The air in the room thickened with unspoken fears, but before she could give voice to her thoughts, a sudden commotion erupted from the kitchen. It was the sound of breaking glass, followed by muffled cries. All heads snapped in the direction of the noise. "Aiden!" Shay exclaimed, rushing towards the chaos. She and Eli exchanged alarmed glances before they hurried after her, arriving just in time to find their kitchen filled with shards of what remained of a family heirloom, the vase that had belonged to Shay's grandmother. "Mom, it just slipped," Aiden cried, his face awash with panic and remorse. He knelt on the floor, desperately attempting to gather the pieces, but it was too late. The vase lay in ruins, like their once whole family. "No, no, no," Shay murmured, her heart crumbling alongside the shattered fragments. An overwhelming swell of emotion surged within her: grief, anger, and the fracture of false stability. "It's okay, Aiden. It's just a thing. It doesn't matter." But as she whispered that hollow reassurance, a tide of insecurity overcame her. The vase had been more than just an object, it represented lost roots, familial love, and perhaps an innocuous connection to a past they could not regain. "We'll fix this," she added, though the words felt painfully inadequate against the backdrop of her spiraling thoughts. Eli joined her on the floor, carefully gathering shards as if they held answers. "It's not about the vase, Shay. We're still here. We can make new memories, even if we have to let go of the old ones." She looked at him, yearning for reassurance amid the wreckage they faced. Though the road ahead was shadowy, Ella's presence grounded her. She nodded, both acknowledging his words and echoing a silent promise to keep moving forward. As the three of them began cleaning up the remnants of the vase, Shay sensed a heaviness lurking in the air, lingering like a cloud ready to unleash its storm. Just then, her phone buzzed on the counter, cutting through the quiet. The message that appeared on the screen sent a jolt through her, a name she hadn't expected to see, Robert. Her heart hammered in her chest as she opened the message, dread coiling as she read the words. That flowed like poison. You like to play the hero? You have no idea what I'm capable of. This is only the beginning. You'll wish you hadn't crossed me. Shay felt her breath hitch, the moment stretching impossibly as panic clawed at the edges of her mind. She turned to Aiden and Eli, whose faces mirrored her own dawning horror. She thought of Robert's earlier words, how this change in their world would not simply bring liberation, but would invoke a chilling cascade of revenge. It's happening again, she whispered, nausea pooling in her stomach. And as if summoned by that very dread, the sound of footsteps echoed from outside, a slow, deliberate march that crept closer and closer to their haven, twisting her heart into knots. The door rattled ominously on its hinges. Shay could feel their world shifting beneath them, reality morphing into something monstrous and unrecognizable. Fear surged, threatening to drown all hope, and in that moment, she understood this battle was far from over. The weight of Robert's threats loomed large, threatening to shatter any semblance of peace they had momentarily grasped. And as the door to their home began to creak open, all she could do was brace for the reckoning lying in wait. The storm was near, and so was the revelation of just how deeply Robert's shadows had woven into the fabric of their lives. The creak of the door sliced through the suffocating tension, echoing like the tolling of a solemn bell. Shay recoiled instinctively, her eyes wide as she clutched Aiden's hand with a grip that felt desperate, a lifeline that could snap under the pressure of their fear. Stay behind me, Eli commanded, positioning himself in front of Shay and Aiden. His expression was one of fierce determination, but Shay could see the uncertainty lurking just beneath the surface. A flickering candle threatened by a gust of wind, the door swung fully open, revealing a silhouette framed against the dim light of the hallway. It was a woman, tall, elegant yet disheveled, hair falling loose around her shoulders, as if she had rushed here in a frenzy. The mixture of surprise and relief that washed over Shay was palpable. It was Isabel, the cleaning lady who had taken care of their home for years. But this was not the Isabel they knew. This version of her bore a look of fierce resolve, an energy that pulsed in the air surrounding her. Shay, she exclaimed, stepping inside with an urgency that took Shay aback. I saw him. I saw Robert outside. He was lurking near your car. I didn't know if you were home. Shay felt a rush of gratitude mingled with horror. Isabel, you shouldn't have come here. She protested, her voice rife with a mix of dread and gratitude. You could be in danger. Isabel shook her head, stepping further into the room as if she could dissolve the darkness looming over them with sheer will. Danger is not unfamiliar to me. I grew up in it. But I refuse to stand by while you're threatened by that man, she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a shard of glass. We need to act. We can't wait for the police to protect us. It's us against him. Aiden had released Shay's grip and was staring wide-eyed, alternating between fear and fascination. You saw him. What was he doing? He asked, the innocent curiosity of a child contrasting sharply with the heaviness of their situation. That he was watching the house, but he didn't know I was there. Listen, I made calls. We can't rely on traditional methods anymore. There was a fierceness in Isabel's eyes that seemed otherworldly, a spark ignited from deep within. Well, move while he thinks he has the upper hand. Everything was shifting, spinning in a dizzying swirl. Shay's heart trembled in her chest. She had never seen Isabel like this, so fierce, so alive in her conviction. We can't go crazy acting on impulse, she whispered, fear creeping back in, but Isabel's gaze remained locked onto hers, unwavering. Shay, sometimes you have to make a stand before everything you love gets taken from you. Look at your family, your boy needs you, Isabel shot back, her voice firm. You want to fight for him, don't you? Shay inhaled sharply, the weight of Isabel's words crashing over her like a tidal wave. Aiden was trembling, squeezing her arm in a desperate plea for reassurance, and in that moment, Shay realized, for all the warmth and stability that had been shattered, there was still love laced within the shards. Love was the foundation, it ignited that flicker of hope within them all. "Okay," she finally said, the words tumbling forth even as anxiety gnawed at her insides. "Okay, what do we do?" As Isabel began issuing her plans to gather supplies, create a strategy, find a safe place to hide if need be, Shay felt a strange mix of solidarity and fear bloom in her chest. A part of her felt the pull of something primal, something instinctual that screamed for action. The other was terrified, the suffocating dread of potential loss weighing her down. The conversation flowed, ideas spilling from Isabel like a river gushing forth, unfiltered and raw. Shay was swept up in the potential momentum, yet another deep pang of resentment flickered through her thoughts. Why must they fight so desperately? Why could Robert not leave them alone? "This is just the beginning for him," Shay whispered under her breath, feeling the chill of those words reverberate in her mind. "What do you mean?" Eli asked, catching her glance, his brow furrowed. "He told me that if I crossed him, it wouldn't be over. He has something in store for us, something worse." Her heart sank again, shrouded by a sudden wave of dread. But before anyone could respond, her phone buzzed again. Shay dreadfully opened another message from Robert. "You think you can hide? I have friends. You're not safe anywhere." The room froze, the air thick with the weight of Robert's looming threat. They were not just battling one man, they were up against a darkness that spread like roots through their lives, burrowing deeper with every passing moment, and as the implications of his words sank in, understanding dawned, bitter as gall. "I need to know, Isabel," Shay's voice was trembling on the edge of fear. "How did you know he was out there?" Isabel hesitated, her eyes clouded with an emotion more profound than fear. I used to know him, Shay. But that's not important right now. What matters is how we move forward." Shay's heart turned cold, the revelation hit hard, a lightning bolt splitting the tranquil moment between breaths. The storm was no longer just looming, it was here, and the roots of betrayal were intertwined with every moving part of her life. As they all stood there, a thick cloak of uncertainty engulfed them, the clock ticking ominously. Whatever it was that Robert had planned, they were thrust deeper into the chaos that would shape their every action in the days to come. The fight was closer than ever, and so was the reckoning of subtle truths hidden in shadows long forgotten. "I never expected a cleaning lady to show heroic love for a millionaire's special daughter, but here we were, fighting for something more than I ever dared to hope for." The air was dense with tension, a symphony of uncertainty resonating through the room as we confronted the dark truths unfurling like a storm cloud above our heads. In the wake of Robert's threats, the gravity of our reality crashed down around us like shards of a family heirloom, the pieces sharp and jagged, echoing the lives we had once shared under the same roof. But as I looked around, I saw the resolve forming in the faces of those around me, faces of people I had never imagined would stand alongside me in a storm like this. A growing collective desire stirred within us, the desperate yearning for safety, freedom, and love amplifying with every breath we took. Isabel, fierce in her mission, mapped out our next steps with an authority I hadn't realized she possessed. "We have to act now," she asserted with a conviction that sent ripples of warmth through my heart, igniting our fading hope. "We can't wait for him to make his next move." I felt Aiden's hand still clutching mine, stealing strength from the bonds of family we were fighting so desperately to protect. "What if he finds us?" he asked, eyes wide and glistening with fear. I knelt beside him, swallowing the lump in my throat, choosing my words carefully. "I won't let that happen. We have to trust each other, and we will figure this out together." As Isabel continued laying out her strategy, I glanced at Eli. His eyes glimmered with urgency yet hinted at something deeper, something I had not yet understood. "Shay," he said softly, pulling me away from the group. "We really need to know who we're dealing with. If there's a chance Robert has leverage over you, or us, we need to understand what he's hiding." The accusation landed like a fist, a reminder that Robert's treachery ran deeper than we had anticipated. "I don't know everything about him," I struggled to articulate, the bitterness of missing time choking me. "He was the father I never could understand, locked in his rules, and I faltered. The truth of my relationship with him felt like an open wound, festering beneath the surface, whatever it is, you need to let us in. We're all in this together, Eli urged, his hands ghosting over mine, a grounding force amidst the chaos. So, if you feel safe enough, let's take that leap. Say whatever you haven't yet, Bella, and so I did. I disclosed the deep-seated fears that loomed large, the stories of affection twisted into a chokehold of expectations, the way our lives spun around that wooden clock, ticking away precious moments drowned by Robert's fierce grip on sanity and life in general. But in that, my voice quivered, revealing an unexpected vulnerability I'd fought hard to suppress. The monster stood not only in Robert but cradled within me, the fear of losing what little control I had, of the wretched reality that clung tightly to us. I recalled how alone and unheard I had felt as Robert's daughter, how I'd overlooked my own intuition in hopes of receiving love in the form I craved. When I finished, silence enveloped the room. No one can control who you are, Shay, Isabel said, her voice unwavering. You have the power to determine your path, and together we must pave it with courage. In that moment, clarity surged through me, burning bright and fierce. You're right. No more hiding. I turned to the group, our collective resolve reigniting with the fierce urgency rippling through us all. Well, face Robert, but first we have to ensure Aiden's safety while we sound the alarm to those who might assist against him. The crew of our allies formed a plan, a tapestry woven carefully with threads of loyalty and hope. A glimmer of safety blossomed in the face of adversity, the fear that had once bound us now spiraled into bravery, fanning the flames of our rebellion, but as the day waned, a nervous energy electrified the air, as if the universe stood still, watching our every move. We made calls and reached out to confidants, backing ourselves with whispers of affirmation, the pulse of our plan surging as we synchronized our actions like the beating of a solid heart, and just as we began assembling everything, something inside a small voice whispered dread. The sharp edges of Robert's threats danced sinisterly in my mind, just as twilight beckoned. My phone buzzed once. Maureen, incoming message from Robert once again, followed closely by the sinking feeling that gripped the pit of my stomach. This time, it felt different. Threats had morphed into promises laced with venom, muting my every heartbeat with sheer terror. I warned you, Shay. I have eyes everywhere. You will regret this. With each word I read, a cold shiver raced through my veins, awakening a deeper recognition of just how far Robert would go to keep his grip on control. We can't protect ourselves unless we're ready to uncover the whole truth, I murmured, but the dread paralyzed my heart. Pain pooled at the corners of my mind, but embers of courage flickered bright. I refused to let him win. I refused to surrender. We're stronger together, and I could feel the alliance at my back, a mosaic of courage, fierce against the lurid backdrop of Robert's threats. Let him come. As night cloaked us in shadows, I turned to my gathered family and friends, feeling the emboldened spirit of those I held dear fortify my resolve. Together, I said. Tonight, we take back what is ours. But as the first steps echoed confidently toward confrontation, the moment swelled around us like a storm on the horizon, and deep inside, I believed the battle had only just begun. With each whisper of truth, each tightening thread of unity, we found solace in the knowledge that we would face whatever was yet to come not as individuals bearing wounds, but as a commitment forged in love. And as we stepped forward into uncertainty, I realized in that moment of clarity the greatest power lay not in control, but in unwavering hope. Because no matter how dark the night, dawn always breaks, and with it comes the promise of victory. The final line, engraved in my heart, resonated like a vow: I refuse to be afraid of what comes next, for together, we are unstoppable.